Hey friends, Jeff here with a new episode of Conversations Life Science Leaders Aren't Having. Today we welcome as a guest Jacqui Barendregt. Jacqui is the Chief Operating Officer at IDEA Pharma. Jacqui has a really interesting journey. She began her professional life as a nurse and moved into roles in the pharmaceutical drug development space, and now is at IDEA Pharma in the role of COO. What IDEA Pharma is doing is really challenging life science drug development companies to think differently about how they approach this process, to think innovatively, and capitalize on the full potential of every molecule that is involved in the drug development process, ultimately to bring the best product to market to serve as many patients as possible. In this conversation, we dive into Jacqui's story. We dive into how she sees the industry and what her unique role is at IDEA Pharma to both lead her team and challenge some traditional notions in the life science space. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. Jacqui Barendregt, welcome to the show. Really thrilled to have you as a guest.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you for the invitation to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You heard me just do a brief introduction of who you are, and particularly who you are to me, but would love for you to start off and let us know what you're up to in the world.
Yeah, sure. So, as you mentioned, I work at IDEA Pharma and recently moved into the role of Chief Operating Officer. And mainly what I can say is what I help to do is realize our vision, which is to inspire pharma to bring more great medicines to market. And we do that through our unique expertise in terms of path to market strategies. So I'm looking across the organization, what can we do better in terms of delivering on that vision, but also how can we make more impact by growing as an organization. So you can imagine there's lots of things to cover, and it's a really exciting journey from where our founder, Mike Ria, started this 20 years ago to where we are now, and working with some of the smartest and most intelligent teams in the pharma industry on highly strategic issues, which I find really fulfilling also as a day-to-day work and effort to contribute to that.
Now, while lots of our listeners are leaders in the life science space, we do have a fair number of listeners, of which I'm always shocked of, who aren't in life science, but they love to hear about the work that our guests are doing. Could you give an example? And I'm sure the nature of the projects are so varied, but could you give us an example of how you boots on the ground, how you're helping or how you have helped a particular client?
Yeah, sure. So I think what we know, or what is kind of also public knowledge, is that the development of new medicines is hugely complex. I know our industry is known for a high failure rate in terms of all of the opportunities that might be identified early stage, but then the ones that eventually make it to market is really a fraction of that. And how we help our clients is especially when they are at that early stage, is thinking through all of that complexity, but also leaning into the uncertainty that you have when you are developing a novel target or a new molecule or treatment modality, is to understand really where could it work and where would it be most meaningful also to bring it to market. And then how could we design the process in such a way that we will be able to bring it to market. And in terms of how we can help our clients, it's really kind of changing the paradigm from the pharmaceutical industry from prediction, where at an early stage, where we still know so little, we might want to predict what kind of differentiation a product can bring, what kind of disease endpoints it might be able to treat, and what kind of safety or tolerability profile we might expect of these medicines. But ultimately, keeping options alive in terms of what could be possible, and then starting to explore those options and leaning into the uncertainty. And one of the things we do in order to achieve that is think about every molecule, every product as it not being average. Because what we see a lot in our industry is that if you have certain treatment modalities or certain molecules and diseases that are being targeted, is that we look at what has been done before, what is the standard of care, what is the benchmark that has been set. But we keep kind of questioning that and think of other possibilities that could be valuable for the market, for patients, for healthcare systems, for prescribers. And in order to, and by doing that, we kind of create unique profiles that then can be developed, can be researched, and ultimately, obviously, make it to market as well and really realize pharma innovation.
And you, for many years, up until just recently, you were, let's call it, in the weeds of doing that work. And
yes.
And now you've been put into a role of Chief Operating Officer at IDEA Pharma. I know it's very early days, but how has that transition been for you personally? I'm sure there's an impact in the organization, but to go from, being in the details with clients and doing some of the things that you just described to now moving into a more strategic role, a senior level of the organization. How's that going?
Yeah, so a great question. And what I can see is that having been with boots on the ground, as you say, I do understand the reality of our clients really well. I've also worked on the client side myself, had various commercial roles in pharma organizations. Also have a background as a medical professional. So that's also practice and experience I can bring into my perspectives. But having been involved in the process of delivery and knowing really what are, you could say, the priorities for our clients, what kind of improvements do they want to make, what are the challenges they are solving. And now I have the opportunity to look across our portfolio of clients and projects and also see, well, how can we even further kind of strengthen those partnerships with our clients and pharma organizations? How can we also work with ecosystem partners to bring different capabilities to the table as well? And how can we develop as an organization so that we have the best talent working at IDEA Pharma? So in that sense, I feel it's a very seamless transition and also really speaks to the experience I've built in previous roles in my career. So it's a great opportunity.
Mm. And I can hear you describe the benefits of all that experience, but I'm wondering, looking at it from a different angle, because the name of our show is Conversations that Life Science Leaders Aren't Having. I'm wondering, what's the downside of having the depth and the breadth of that experience? As you are now in this COO role, what's the downside for you of having all that experience?
So I think, and perhaps it's even some of your previous guests have said as well, but I think also, obviously, you're aware of the full spectrum of options. I think also looking in the context of like, how is the market developing and what influences the market? If you think of kind of macro level, what we've seen with COVID, but also what we currently have seen with inflation across the world, which also has an effect on the people that work in the workplace. And I think with all these experiences, it gives an opportunity to be aware of it, and as a leader, plan for these things so that we can best anticipate situations happening. But I'm also equally aware of, you could say, the knowledge I don't have, and you could say the breadth and the scope I'm covering in terms of, okay, there's still a lot more to learn, which I think is also actually really stimulating. But obviously we're on a journey, and that's kind of how I also then look at it, is that as an organization, we're also growing as a journey, and as a result of it, I'm also growing and developing. So that is kind of the challenge to balance.
Mm. I'm going to put a pin in that because I have lots more questions about your journey. Because again, it's what I'm aware of is what this phrase that you've probably heard me say before: "What got you here won't get you to where you want to go." And
Exactly.
I imagine there's some parts there that what got you here, your experience, your success, how you showed up in
Yes.
your role is not what's going to get you to where you want to go, which is now being at the senior level. But let's put a pin in that. Because I want folks to get to know you a little bit better. It's one of the things that I hear over and over again that people enjoy is when we get to do that. And we do that through the 3 H's. The first is a hero, a hardship, and a highlight. Would you pull the curtain back a little bit on who you are and tell us what your 3 H's are?
Yes. So I think in terms of, you could say, highlight, we already started talking about that with my journey at IDEA Pharma, which was a decision I took more or less 3.5 years ago after having worked in the industry for almost 17 years, to think like, okay, this is not the necessarily the environment, or kind of I'm not in the right role or organization to make the impact I want to be making. And moving to the consultancy side, where I didn't have consultancy experience, was on one side a big change. But it's really a highlight in terms of, you could say, the environment and the team I'm working with, the clients, and I think also the kind of startup mentality that we have, the creative thinking, the entrepreneurialism is really something that suits me well, and that I can see has really accelerated also in terms of my development, and you could say opportunities to make an impact. In that respect, also to your earlier question around like what has changed then in my role since those 3.5 years, and something you and I've talked about as well, is that it's no longer about, you could say, competence, but it's about fallibility. So it's not about demonstrating certain skills, but really kind of moving to a place where, as a leader, you provide clarity of what the North Star is, where we're going, and how we will get there, and that people feel like that is that attracts them, that would motivate them. Because I think having that purpose and that motivation is what makes people come out of bed in the morning. That's for one, but also to bring their best selves to work and feel good about what they're doing. So I think continuing that journey is definitely a highlight. In terms of heroes, I thought a bit about this question as I heard you ask this other guest on the show as well. And I'm in that sense that I don't have one hero in particular. What I found is that I find inspiration in different places, which can be, you could say, from reading a book from David Epstein about range, and about, you could say, exploring a broad range of different roles and different interests before you would kind of specialize yourself into a certain area, to Tim Cook, who built Apple in a very different way than Steve Jobs would have done, but also at a more, you could say, intimate level in the people around me, where they've gone through difficult times or challenges and have been able to overcome that, which I find really inspiring and speaking to, you could say, the strength people have within themselves. To even in my children, if I see how they can be embracing certain things, or trying to you could say, explore the world, so to speak. And in terms of hardship, I think it's something that everyone comes across in their life, but I think having gone through grief and losing my mom due to brain cancer, which was a rare tumor, that's been really hard. On one side, I felt, as you could say, having a medical background, that I had failed, that I felt like, oh, could have done more to get her in front of the right doctor, get her the right treatment. but yeah, it wasn't stoppable, so to say. So it unfortunately resulted in her dying 3 years ago. And I think from that place, also going through such kind of strong emotions, seeing the impact it can have then on your mental well-being and kind of your quality of life. I think I found I was really in the survival mode, and that was hard. Also, obviously for my family. And on one side, at a certain point, I still remember that I felt like, okay, I really need to turn this around in terms of my mindset and how I think about it, because otherwise it becomes really more towards, you could say, depression or even the further challenge. And I think on one side, that also shows kind of how resilient people are. And I think I've been also lucky in that time that I've had family and friends who were okay with me, showing my emotions and telling the story over and over again, which also helped me to overcome that. And I think with that is also one of my learnings, is, you could say, showing that vulnerability actually can really help people and can help you to move forward, as well as the power of the mind in terms of where you want to go. And I know also my mom wouldn't have wanted me to stay in that kind of grief and sadness, or feeling guilty about what had happened, which obviously things sit out of your control very much with that as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jacqui, for sharing that, what was clearly a challenging, difficult moment, or not just a moment, but a season of your life. So thanks for that. Can you think of a moment, maybe not the moment, but a moment in your life that you still think about that has shaped who you are today?
I think there's on one side many different moments, but I think in particular moving from the Netherlands to Denmark to take a different role and kind of bring the whole family along, which also had implications for my husband's job and for my children, obviously. That has been a really, I would say, also humbling experience, in terms of going from a place where you have comfort and you're very much, also a certain level of confidence in terms of your abilities and competencies, then to find yourself in an environment where there's no social network. There's a new job with high expectations, and also a level of responsibility in terms of commitments that you've made for the family to make sure that everything works out well. And that's been, besides that, it was, you could say, a great opportunity for development and expanding my skill set, also in terms of, you could say, getting to know myself better, was a really important journey. And one of the things I've learned there, and in terms of, you could say, on one side, what always has been helping me, and kind of what you refer to, what got you here might not get you to the next level, was definitely something I also experienced in that situation, because I'm a results goal-oriented person. I can see through situations quickly and kind of see what the opportunities are. But in this case, in terms of where the team was at the time and the problems that we were facing on an organizational level, it wasn't so much about the results. It was a lot more about leaning into the process, making time or making connections. So I think in that sense, that was a really valuable experience for me as a leader, and also managing people in terms of, okay, how can I speak to their needs, which is not so tangible as, you could say, some of the goals that might have been put into the plan or on a PowerPoint, so to speak. And I think that has helped me to not only improve my relationships with people at work, but also in my personal life in terms of slowing down my pace, and leaning into, you could say, a process which might be a bit more messy than being focused on the end goal or the result that we would want to achieve.
Um, yeah, and it's striking me what you said, to be put into thinking out of your comfort zone and being put into a completely brand new environment, a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, but I think that's a thing that most of us don't do, is take risks like that, to step out of what's comfortable. I'm wondering, I don't know how small your kids were when you made that change. What have you seen the impact on them being of taking that risk? Obviously, they didn't have a choice, but to being put into something completely brand new, uncomfortable, unfamiliar. Have you seen the footprint or the impact of that experience on them as they've grown?
Yes, no, absolutely. And I think, well, we definitely prepared them or tried to prepare them for like what's coming. But yeah, you can't really be prepared. You just need to live through it. At the time, they were 4.5 and 2.
Hmm.
And the 4.5-year-old, he is very communicative. But then he was also in an environment going to daycare and primary school or kindergarten where he couldn't communicate. So for him, it was really challenging. And fortunately, we did obviously notice that and kind of helped him with finding an outlet for that. And also because he's so communicative, he started picking up the language really quickly. And yeah, I would say that's definitely one of the truths, is that their brain has so much more, you could say, possibilities to pick up a language. And for the 2-year-old, I think on one side, because there was a lot of focus on my oldest son, he might have felt that as well in terms of the change, and obviously not seeing like their grandparents as often as they would do before. So I think that was a challenging period. But on the other side, what I can see now is that we are really tight as a family. And also the brought us together is, well, they can have their moments, but they have such a strong connection. And they still remember those experiences and think of them in you could say a positive way. It's not like they have always think about, oh, this was horrible. What did you do to me, Mom? We didn't like this. But they are definitely interested in going back and have good memories about it. So I think for them, it's been also, you could say in that sense, life forming as they were so young. And when we then moved here back again to the Netherlands, I could see also with adjusting then to the school system here, also had another impact on them. But all of those experiences will shape their path moving forward.
I always find it so fascinating, the parallels between being a parent and being a leader of adults in an organization. Yeah. How have you been shaped as a leader at IDEA Pharma in an organization or organizations from your role as leader, a co-leader with your husband, but a leader of as a mom?
I think on one side, what you could say, and I think this is, if you would bring those two worlds together, is that there's a need for clarity about where we're going, and structure, and predictability to a certain degree. And I think as soon as there's an element of unpredictability, it needs clear communication. It needs checking in how people are feeling or how the kids would be feeling. So that's where I could see those two worlds coming together in terms of leadership and giving direction.
Yeah, So good. I think it's a place that we don't cultivate learning enough. I think me included, I think we largely separate them. Oh, that's home and the family. This is work. But I think there's a lot to learn from this world of parenting that is applicable, very very applicable, as you pointed to one example there. It's a really interesting place. I think it's a really interesting place to look.
No, absolutely. And I think one other parallel is, and it's even a quote by Einstein, is around that play is the highest form of creativity. And I think in the work that we're doing, creative strategic thinking is hugely important. So finding different sources of inspiration, and allowing yourself also sometimes to, you could say, let your hair down and have fun is equally important, and something you can then bring into the work as well.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, so good. Well, thanks for going there. We try not to make really clear lines and say, well, this is off limits. So I really appreciate you going to that place. So just to come back now to the theme to recast the name of the show, Conversations Life Science Leaders Aren't Having, you have a really unique seat. I mean, you were a medical professional. You were in the space, in the development of the drugs themselves in life science companies, and now you are somewhat outside in, but outside as part of a consultancy. What are those conversations, or what's one conversation that life science leaders aren't having that you wish they were having more of?
I would say, and this speaks to, you could say, changing the pharma paradigm from also prediction to asymmetric learning, which is around incentives. So if we think of developing medicines and how it's typically organized in our industry, but then also if you start thinking about the incentives in health systems, and I know there's lots of differences between US and European markets and Asia, but if we think of the drug development, usually people are rewarded for stage progression, meaning, going from phase 1 to phase 2 and so forth. And on one side, you could wonder if we are incentivizing people to just reach the next hurdle in development, but not necessarily are focused on what is the best possible destination. Do we get the most value out of those molecules or out of those people even? Because would you take any risk if you're uncertain in terms of trying novel approaches or trying different strategies where you would want to develop your asset if you're not certain, and you might not be rewarded for it? And it's not only, you could say, that financial incentive, it's also, you could say, the recognition you would get from your leaders in the organization. We talk a lot about, oh, that was a failed trial or that drug has failed, but it's not about the molecule, because the molecule you have in the lab and what you launch in market is the same. It's really about what you learn in between. And if we can, as an industry, stay in a phase of exploration and asking questions of the molecule, to find out more of where it could play, and in terms of, you could say, getting more certainty, then when you get to kind of the phase 3, there's still a lot of options on the table, but you have more evidence, more data that will help to, you could say, improve the decisions that life science leaders are making. And I think that then follows through in terms of, I think, the people who also make, you could say, drug development possible, which are the patients, and incentivizing them for participating in clinical trials and helping to advance science and clinical practice. And I know there's, and fortunately also at IDEA Pharma, we have people in our network who are thinking the same way and are, you could say, really walking the talk in terms of including patients and people in the design of clinical trials, but also in you could say, the problems that need to be solved. But I think we can go a step further and really think, okay, our data as people is hugely valuable, and we start to acknowledge and recognize that if we think of kind of more the consumer market and the data that is being shared and picked up there. But what about then our personal medical data, and how can we go from calling people subjects to really recognizing them as people who add significant value in terms of bringing medicines to market? And that's where I would like to invite more people to have that conversation. It's not something that can be, you could say, solved tomorrow, but definitely something that we should talk more about.
And one of the things that that I've experienced in doing the show for almost a year is many of our guests are challenging the very fabric of how things have been done for decades. And like really calling into question a standard approach, whether that be in what you've just described or in how companies are funded. And again, the subjects are numerous, but what I'm getting from you is you're really challenging the way things have always been done. Yes. The normal progression from phase 1 to phase 2 and yep. So forth, how we treat the subjects, how we treat those patients, really challenging the standard model of how things are done. In your world, Jacqui, who is the tip of the spear in breaking through those old ways or those ways that we've always done it? Who is the one or who are the ones that really need to start thinking and operating differently?
So I would say probably your listeners, in terms of the leaders of pharma organizations, or if you think of larger biopharma companies, it's also the VP level and portfolio leadership, to really give the permission also to the teams to bring their creative thinking, rather than to say, oh, we're just going to come up with this one prediction of where this drug might work or what might be the best opportunity, to allow for a lot more exploration and leaning into that uncertainty and saying, well, I don't know this. This is something that we assume as a team, but can we go and find out? And then we come back to you, so that it becomes more of an iterative process rather than stage gating on the way through. And then I think, besides giving the permission for people to kind of change their approach, obviously enabling them in order to do that, we need to also think of like what kind of process or tools do we put in place. And one of the things that we, for instance, started using during the pandemic as well is an AI solution that can kind of scrape all publications in terms of potential targets and disease areas, so that there's a correlation in terms of where there could be a possibility a drug could work. And we don't use that to say, okay, this is a long list of where you can go with your asset, but it's really used as a tool to augment the thinking of our consultants. And that's where we can start to bring in also more strategically in terms of the solutions that we provide to the teams, so that they can really, you could say, spend more time being creative and thinking about what could be my next best experiment to find out. Because, for instance, this might be a really good opportunity in rheumatoid arthritis or in cardiovascular disease, but there's no evidence. And what we currently typically see is that the industry gravitates to where there's stronger evidence, which is also called, well, let the molecule speak, or let the science speak, follow the science. But on the other side, we need to be strategic about the questions we ask and the answers we want to find. So that's also kind of the model that we want to bring into the industry more. And I think if leaders in the industry can reinforce that approach, I think then we'll see more of that innovation coming to life. And I think also that has been demonstrated with the COVID pandemic, where we, as an industry, did a tremendous job in breaking records in terms of finding therapeutic options for a disease that we didn't know, which, currently is under control. So I would like to see more of that as well.
Um, it it strikes me, though, there are a lot of forces. I hear your invitation to our listeners, to those that are leading these organizations, and it feels like there's a lot of, let's call them barriers or challenges to being courageous in that way. Like the shareholder, the pressure of shareholders that shareholders put on the stock price to that sort of says, oh, I can imagine somebody's listening. Well, I would love to do that, but I have to meet the expectations of the market. Or, that's one particular factor or force. What is the? I'm thinking of the question. It just courage. That's the word. This really requires courage to do what you're inviting people to do, because there are really, big forces that are keeping us often in the standard ways of doing things. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, no, that is spot on. I would say when I was boots on the ground on the pharma industry, obviously, as you say, there's predictions, there's expectations. I think in my time in pharma, I've come to appreciate that those predictions and forecasts are always wrong, especially if you're bringing or if you're launching in a new market. Like, quite often the benchmarks that have been set are exceeded or not achieved. So you could on one side argue, why spend so much time on that? Can we use our time elsewhere? But also there's an element of comfort with rather knowing like what kind of the average result might be, than going for something completely different, which requires courage. And I think in terms of, you could say, the dynamics that are in the industry, and is that it also has to do with setting that kind of expectation. And then, what would be the rationale if you would want to go completely different and think different about what might be possible? And that's where, for instance, a plan to learn comes in, so that you can constantly make sure that people are engaged on what are the assumptions, what are we striving towards to. Also here in terms of the direction versus the destination that you're taking. And I believe that if we start changing our approach in the companies and in our processes and in how we ask people to kind of what they bring into the process when developing medicines, is that will be a change of direction, and we'll get to that different destination that I know a lot of people also want to achieve within in the pharma industry.
Yeah, I love that distinction of direction versus destination. That when we're so fixed on the destination, that it is sometimes hard to break through old paradigms of how things have always been done, versus be directionally oriented, which there's even there's a freedom that I sense comes with that side of the distinction, direction versus destination.
Yes. And that's a lot how we look as well at, you could say, the molecules that we help develop. It's thinking about the destinations and all of the possibilities, from, you could say, the ones that might be expected to the ones that are really out of the box and could sound crazy, to then thinking through what could be the direction in terms of the paths to develop them, and how can we innovate within that as well. What do we need to learn on the way through?
I'd like to bring it back to your journey personally as a leader. We've said a couple, you said it, I've said it a couple of times, what got you here won't get you to where you want to go. As a leader in this field who is kind of the tip of the spear in this, what do you see personally as your frontier? You can see it. I kind of have this image of frontier, like you're exploring a new land. You can see where you're going personally. What's a frontier for your leadership as you are seeking to make a big impact both at IDEA Pharma and in for your clients?
Yeah, great question. I think, and this kind of goes back to also when I was still working as a medical professional, and then working in the pharma industry, that just the time it takes for people to really access those medical innovations is something where I think I would like to make more of an impact, and where I can see as an industry as a whole, together with, you could say, regulators, but also with medical associations, and think through how can we get sometimes life-saving or also life-changing medicines to patients more quickly, make sure that they are better informed about the options they have, and then are also engaged in a way that they can use the treatment in the best possible way, or in the intended way, so to speak. And that's where I think the work that we're doing, and where I can also contribute, is really meaningful and inspiring as well.
And I'm going to come back to this idea of putting yourself in an uncomfortable or unfamiliar. What is the uncomfortable shift or courageous decision that you have to make, and how you show up to do that?
So for me, that is also about, I would say, facilitation, making connections, and enabling, more as an enabler in terms of that kind of role, because I think I get a chance to work across a lot of different organizations, with our clients, with our ecosystem partners, with our team members, and also having an overview of these big, you could say, items and issues across the industry and in healthcare systems. It can be as easy as saying, oh, I think you need to speak to this person. And those are things that have helped me as well in terms of some of the challenges I've been tackling in my career. And that is more kind of the role I think I can play as well, is bringing people together who are aiming for perhaps the same thing, and where there can be a positive exchange of how you can help each other. And yeah, it's you could say it's basically one really step at a time. What I would love to do is also, you could say, and this speaks more to how system change would happen, is really bring different groups together and let's say, well, if we could draw a new blueprint for the pharma industry and for organizations, how would we start, and what would we want to improve? So almost starting from a blank canvas, and then thinking, well, if this would be our end goal and most desired situation, how can we get there from where we are today? Would be something that I think would be really interesting to contribute to as well.
Interesting, and just I'm sensing, because you responded to a bit uncomfortable too. Like,
yes. Oh, yes.
Disorienting, uncomfortable, requiring some courage for you to step into that role as opposed to on the execution side.
Yes. Yes, because it's not so much about then necessarily delivering outputs, you could say, to clients, but it's more around the types of conversations we're initiating, and also creating urgency and priority for some of these topics, which I guess also for people comes with exposure. So what could I do to, align people and provide clarity about why this would be useful in terms of investing time and energy into.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's really exciting. It's really exciting, Jacqui. we could probably keep talking, but we'll close with this final question that we ask most of our guests, and that is, I'm going to give you the magic wand in this moment, and you get to wave it all over every single life science leader around the globe, those that are in positions of key influence, and you get to plant the seed for one conversation they're going to have over the next week. What's that one conversation that you want to plant the seed for them to have?
So I think for me, this goes back to the human aspect and what as an industry we're trying to realize and the impact we're trying to make is a lot of kind of what we've seen in the previous years is business development and acquisitions of pharma companies to kind of build out their portfolio. And I would encourage, rather than looking at numbers and business cases, to see, can I get on the phone with a patient organization? And if I'm interested in investing in a specific therapy area, have a like intimate conversation around what it is living with that disease and what could make it better, what kind of treatment opportunities could be possible. And I think that also speaks to something that we've been talking a lot about. It's, as a leader, it's not just about having the connection in terms of thinking through rationally and bringing your intellect, but it's also about the heart and making a connection at that level. And I think bringing that into decision making, or at least in terms of your perspectives of how you view opportunities, is equally important.
I love that conversation. I love it. So I encourage everybody who just heard Jacqui's invitation to that one conversation that you do that. Jacqui, this has been really, really wonderful. If folks want to know more about you or more about IDEA Pharma, where can we send them?
So they can definitely visit our website, ideapharma.com. We're also on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. So yeah, there's always I would say, open invitation for virtual coffee and having a conversation.
Awesome. And we'll put all that in the show notes. Thanks again, Jacqui. Really appreciate your heart.
Yes. Thank you.